COVID came, and with that, the need of keep going with events, and live streaming and online events became the real big thing. Suddenly and hopefully, COVID it's going away, but the online event live streaming, I think, came for good. We're gonna talk about this with Ralph Cochrane, and please let me know if I said it properly to talk about it. So stay tuned if you want to learn more about live streaming and online events or hybrid as well. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of the Special Marketing Live Show. I think it's the 19th episode. Welcome from sunny Portugal today. Really sunny day. So today we're going to talk about these live streaming and online events and hybrid events as well. What it is, what you can expect, what you should have in mind if you want to organize one, what you should have in mind if you want to be a speaker, or if you are a speaker, because there are so many things you need to know to prevent crazy situations or awkward situations to happen. And to talk about it, I have Ralph Cochrane. Hopefully I'm saying it properly. He's waiting in the basement. Please, if you have any questions during the live show, feel free to ask. If you want to say something, if you just want to say hello. Nobody will bite you. Okay, so let's bring Ralph. Are you there at the basement? Yes,
I'm
you
here.
are.
I'm in the basement studio. And I've got to say, it's a sunny day in the UK as well today. So it's not just
Oh,
Portugal, but
okay.
that's unusual. We love to talk about the weather, as you know, in the
Yes,
UK.
yes. And well, even though lately there's this situation about not so many rain here in Portugal, and this is turning to a problem, an issue, because there's no water. There's no water to the animals to drink, and also to, I don't know how to say regard. Oh my god, because the agriculture needs water. Okay, so
It's a
there you go.
drought. It's a drought. Yeah, I mean, I wish we could send you water from the UK because we always have too much, which is what we're famous for. But yeah, it's not much fun having a drought. But it's great to see you. I mean, we've worked together during
Yes,
COVID, and we had
yes.
a great time. You in Portugal. I think I was actually in Spain for that conference, which was an affiliate marketing conference. So yeah, what a couple of years. I mean, who would have thought that we'd be live streaming from virtual studios like this one? And I think your studio is real.
Yes,
It's
it
just such a
is.
change, isn't it, from before?
Absolutely, absolutely. First of all, thank you so much for joining me. It's a pleasure to have you here. And also, if you don't mind to present yourself, and then we can start the conversation. Is that okay?
Well, I also have a little video that I wouldn't mind showing in a second, but just to introduce myself, Event.video, we do what basically our name says, which is we do video for events. We do a lot of promo, a lot of recording, but an awful lot of live streaming. And more recently, we've moved into hybrid events as well. So as the world starts to go back to normal, it's not just about virtual, it's about hybrid. But here's one example, which is a little video that I given Marco of our work.
Do you want me to play it?
Absolutely.
Let's play it.
Yes. Yeah,
Awesome.
so there's a little example of what we do. Anyway, that was COP26, which was the big climate change conference, and you didn't see too much of the final output there, which was to Hopin, funnily enough, who own StreamYard. But there was a lot of filming out on the streets, the protesters, the things that were going on in the city of Glasgow. But we were also live streaming as well from some of the events. So it's kind of, that gives you a flavor anyway of what we do.
Perfect, perfect. How do you started this live streaming journey?
Well, I was live streaming before COVID. So for me, I'm an engineer originally by background, and then I went into the video media industry probably about 15 years ago now. And before COVID, I was traveling the world. I was doing typical event production, a lot of promo videos, and a lot of just recording conference talks. And some of my clients started to say, can we live stream this? I think it was the early days of people wanting to make sure as many people as possible were watching the content. And I would be typically working in places like Latin America. So, I've been very privileged. I've worked in Argentina, I've worked in Mexico, in Russia, in China, and much further afield as well in Asia. So not just in Europe. And some of the tech industry were really keen to live stream. So I got into it quite a while ago, and I'm used to some of the more traditional tools, things like Wirecast, vMix, OBS, which is what a lot of gamers use that's free. And then I think with COVID, I was already reaching the point where I could see that the cloud was going to be the future. And I think for all industries, whether you're in legal, insurance, finance, you will have seen this disruption from the cloud. But for me, particularly, and for the team that I was working with, it meant that we didn't have to take as much equipment. And that's a big issue for us. For example, I have my next big shoot abroad is in Senegal, in Africa. I've got to think about what equipment am I taking? And every piece of equipment, it's almost like an expedition, is for a reason, because I'm limited. I can't just take everything that I own. So the cloud was really important because you could start to replace some of the things that before we would be bringing lots of heavy equipment in. And at the time, the cloud wasn't that great, to be honest. And then, early days of cloud-based streaming, we had products like Stage 10, I remember, was one of the first, which are Canadian. And then, of course, StreamYard came out. And now we're starting to see others as well. So we were just talking backstage about EV Mux, for instance, which is Israeli. But there are others as well. And I think the rise of Amazon and Google Cloud and Azure from Microsoft meant that people were experimenting. And so early on in COVID, the event industry, unfortunately, really died very quickly. I came back, I think, January 2020 from a big show with Cisco, big tech vendor, feeling really good. We'd done all this live streaming. We'd done a really good job. I thought 2020 is going to be a year of real growth. And then COVID hit. And it was pretty clear to me that really one of the few things we could do was to just improve the quality of streaming from home and for virtual events. And really at that point, people weren't talking about virtual events. They talked about webinars, but they weren't really considering that you could have a complete event online. And we were in there early. We partnered with some of the big tech vendors, not just Hopin, but particularly a big shout out to Brella, who are a Finnish company. I'll show you actually. Do you mind me showing you a little bit of what these?
Okay. Do you want me to bring the screen share?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. There you go.
I'll show you really quick. So first of all, this is my studio. Where you're looking at me now, I took this about 10 minutes ago. And then I changed my T-shirt. Obviously, you've got to get the event video branding on. But this is my little studio right now. So that's kind of behind the scenes that you don't see. And I've got a green screen. I'm using a Logitech StreamCam web camera. I'm using a MacBook Air, actually, which with the M1 chip is a fantastic computer if you're in the market for an upgrade. I'm sure you'll have an affiliate link for Apple, won't you, later on, Marco? But basically, this is my setup. And for me as a presenter, because I also host and have hosted a lot of events, this simple setup, what you can't see on here is also a light. So I'm using an Elgato key light, and I'm actually bouncing it off the ceiling to cover the green screen. This basic setup allowed me to present, to create content, and the tools like StreamYard that we're using right now really made a huge difference to the overall quality of what we're doing. But talking about Brella, here is an example of an event platform. I've got a lot of time for Brella because early on I met the guys at Brella and I said, we do live streaming. They do basically they do the event platform, so it's kind of the website that the whole event sits in, but they're really well known for networking. So they have an artificial intelligence based networking tool that matches you to other people at the show. And if I just scroll down here, these are all events that we've run during COVID up to the current day. So you can just see a huge number of events. I think it's over 130 that we've run with them. Typically, they're a day, 2 days, 3 days, maybe a whole week. You can see everything, medicine here, the London Wine Fair, aircraft and engines. I mean, all sorts of things. And we've actually got one that's live this afternoon. So I hope these guys don't mind me showing this. But here is a little bit of the Brella interface. You can see down here it's making some recommendations about who I could speak to if I wanted to. But on the live stream, which is really our bit, we should see, okay, he's just finished. But here we've got somebody saying thank you. But you can see that basically we're using very similar tools to what you're seeing here. Of course, there's a lot of production behind this, which we're going to come on and talk about. But this is an example of basically what we do. And if you look at this event here, you can see it carries on tomorrow. It's a classic event. It just happens to be virtual. We've also moved on recently to hybrid. I say recently, we were doing it during lockdown when we could. So here in the UK, lockdown wasn't a continuous thing. I think it was like that for everybody except for Ireland, possibly, who had the longest lockdown in Europe, I think. But here you can see I've got the cameras in the room. I've got people on the stage. They're looking back. What you can't see is just below here is a big TV screen. They're looking back at the studio. And then over on that right-hand side, you can see that I've got one speaker, or two cameras rather, on the speakers in the room. And I've got people remote as well. And this is really what events, or good events, what they look like now. It's more complicated, of course. It's more expensive to do because you've got people on site. This one happens to be in Norway for the aviation industry. But you event organizers are having to deal with people, speakers who are remote, speakers who are in the room, but also a big audience that may be online that are never going to travel to London or to Lisbon or any of the places that perhaps they would have done. And I'll just show you a couple more. So here you can see the guy in the room, and then this guy is remote, and they're discussing, their analyst presentation. And it's as though it's you and I talking to our webcams, except there's a room of 200 people there as part of the conversation. So it just gives you a flavor of the journey and how things are developing.
Perfect. And one of the things, and this happened to me, let me know, and I want to see your how things were on your side, because I know, can I stop the screen share?
You can, yeah, go for it. You're in control, Marco. It's not me in control today. I'm enjoying the fact that you're in control.
Today I'm in control. So one of the things I struggled at some point, then I just give up and I keep going my journey all by myself. But one of the things a struggle was making people understand the power of live streaming. Did you had this, because one of the things, you were in the business, so you had the need to sell live streaming and all this. Did you had that challenges? And also, in the flip side of the coin, did you had when COVID came and all the people saw themselves closed at home and they needed to keep going, did you have people that maybe at some point they said no to you, and that live streaming thing, it's a joke or something, and then suddenly they faced the need of going live streaming?
Yeah, I think there's always psychology at play, which is based on your own experiences. And you will, of course, meet people who say, well, I don't want to do any live streaming. And that's going to have an impact on the profitability of their event. I mean, during COVID, really, and I think actually Swapcard, who is another of the event platforms that we work with, they put some analysis out that said 84%, I think it was, of the time. So 84% of the time that people are engaged in a virtual event, they're watching the live stream. And it sounds obvious. I mean, what else is there? Well, there's networking, there's sponsors, there's exhibitors. But basically, during COVID, if you wanted to put an event on, live streaming was really the only option that you had. And the next question was, were you going to do it on Zoom, on Microsoft Teams? Were you going to do a proper live stream like this one? Are you going to social media like LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube? What were the plans that you were doing? And I think now, particularly in the UK, COVID, I mean, restrictions are ending here very soon, completely. And also similar in America. What we're seeing now is those business decisions around, should we have a camera crew in the room? Should we try and live stream the content? And then should we go full hybrid where we can have speakers remote and in person? And, you know, the example I showed you there from Norway worked perfectly. Everybody could hear each other. Everybody could interact with each other. And it was a fantastic experience for people in the room, but also people online. And there were a lot of benefits to it. You know, I mean, there were people dropping out. Speakers were dropping out because of, in that case, it was in December, the Omicron variant had just hit, but also because corporate policy, for example, in Germany at the time was you can't travel. So suddenly you lose all your German speakers. The rules changed in Norway, which was where the event was hosted. You needed extra tests, so some people didn't come. Or maybe it was just their work changed. You know, they couldn't spare the time. But it didn't matter because we could either get them in remote or we actually could get a better speaker remotely as well, which I'm sure these guys wouldn't say, but is definitely what was going on. So, you know, suddenly you could get a more senior person speaking or a more relevant person speaking. So, in explaining live streaming, I haven't really had a problem doing that because it's my core business. I think my clients understand the power of video and the power of live streaming. I think the big question is how to make it engaging. How do you keep people watching? How do you make sure that your content is good? And we've done a few things here. You know, I've shown a video. I've shared my screen. We're not using any polling like Slido or Mentimeter if you've used those tools, but we are taking comments from social media. So there's all sorts of ways of making this a bit more of a TV show. And I think the tools, things like StreamYard, EVMux, and others, actually have really helped that as well. So yeah, I'm probably not trying to convince everybody of live streaming. I'm looking for people who get it, and then they're my clients.
Absolutely. And I think that's the point. Get the people that really wants to work with you instead of trying to convince. Like, I don't know, what do you feel, but this makes me crazy when people ask me, please sell me that live streaming thing. And at that point, you lose the warrior because I leave the war.
Well, I
Because
think
for me, yes, yes, yes.
I think I think you've got to show results, haven't you? So, you know, if you are going to put a live stream on, it's like anything. If you're going to make a promo video, a promotional video, it's got to be good, and it's got to either have people calling you or get your point across. I mean, that little video that you played from us, I published that actually this morning. Actually, I think lunchtime, so it's about 3 o'clock in the UK at the moment. And I've already had several messages on LinkedIn saying, you know, some of them are sales messages. Will I enter that into some awards? And some of them are from clients saying, oh, I didn't realize you were at COP26. You know, can we talk about our big event? So it's always about impact. Any tool, it's got to do something for your client's business. But I think there's never been an easier way to have a conversation and get your message out particularly on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, with tools like this. I mean, really, it's almost like, why aren't you doing it? Why, there's got to be a good reason not to do it, I would think.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's go into this event world because this is a complex world. I remember the first time I I was a remote producer. I had this spreadsheet with all the schedules and all the thing, and I just look at that and I thought, "Oh my god, this is crazy." So I came with a different schedule for me because there was too many information, so I needed to remove. But my question is, how do you start planning and helping event organizers to set up everything? Because it's not easy. It's a really complex world to put things from, I don't know, maybe the idea of the event to the spreadsheet with all the moments, everything you need to do.
I think you've got to start with the objective and with the agenda. So there's a lot of experience that comes from having run, in my case, probably over 500 big corporate events. I'm not talking about just, an hour session, but a day, 2 days, 3 days, sometimes even longer. And there are a lot of things that you just know. I know the copyright rules, for instance, on YouTube or Facebook to do with live streaming. I know where I can get music from that won't have a problem. I know how long the tool that you're using at the moment will stream before it gets cut off. But we also have a lot of process which we've developed during COVID. So for us, the sort of magic document is called a call sheet. It's a spreadsheet, and it has the key information that we need when we're producing from the background. So I know who's speaking, I know who the moderator is. I even know the time zone of the session, because for us, a lot of events are not happening in our time zone. Today, there's been 2 events that we've been running. One was in Dubai and one is in London. So the London one's easy, although it's tailored for the US market, so it's on right now. That's the one I showed. But the Dubai one, that starts at 4 a.m. my time. Luckily, we have a global team, so we have people in India, in this case, who are looking after Dubai, and then a supervisor who's there if there's any problems. But you need structure when you've got a global team and you've got people with different skills that you're training. You need to make it as easy as possible. So on the call sheet, I can see the time in Dubai time, and I can also, another drop down box, I can see what time that is for me. So I'm not going to make that mistake. We also use calendaring heavily. We use a lot of digital tools. I mean, Calendly, for instance, which is how people book for technical checks. We have a whole program of you can book in and check out your microphone and how you look and your lighting. You can do all of that with us, and that's through Calendly. It's open 24 hours a day, Monday to Friday. We also pre-record a lot of content because sometimes the live session times just don't work for the speakers, so you need to pre-record that content. And we also do editing as well. So all of those things require a process, even down to, I mean, you've got a lovely streaming background here, you've got your logo on the screen. We do all of that for our clients, and we also do motion graphics. So there'll be a 10-second little video. You saw one actually at the end of the video I played. We do that for every event, and that again is a different process and how that's reviewed. So a lot of production is actually very process orientated. And then the final piece is you have to think about failure. And I think nobody talks about that for some reason, but there's a thing called failure planning. So what happens if my internet connection goes, or if the power here goes, which can happen. And I can even, from experience, tell you where that might happen. So, we've done a lot of work in Africa, for instance, and people think, oh, the internet's not good enough. Well, that's not true. It's an entire continent. If you're in Lagos in Nigeria, you're probably on fiber, which is as good as the fiber, in London here in the UK. But some of the other areas I can tell, oh, that might be a problem. I mean, Australia, there are parts of Australia that the internet's not great, for example, whereas New Zealand tends to be very good. So there are all these things that you just learn from experience, but we try and put as much of that into the process and the documents and the way we're doing things. So we just make it easy for people.
And this for me, it's, and one of the things it's, and I'm sure that you have the same experience, is that even though we think after everything we made, we know everything for the next event, there's always something new coming into the table as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think one
Yes.
of the things that you have to work with clients on is you have to set them deadlines, which is, we know, for example, I'll give you an example. I need all of your sponsor videos 5 days before an event. I know that for a lot of clients, it's not going to work out that way. Like, there's going to be somebody who comes in late. And if you give me a list of company names, I can probably predict who it's going to be. But the point is that I've got 90% of those videos and I know what I'm dealing with. And I've checked the videos and I've made sure that they play properly. Whereas if I don't say anything, I'm going to get it on the day, or I'm going to get to a break in a big virtual event and I'll play 3 videos. And suddenly the client is saying to me, there should be 5. Well, I don't have 5. I don't need that stress, particularly when you're on site. When you're in the room, and again, that's where the cloud wins, because I can still have a technician remotely dealing with virtual speakers, and that's one less thing that I have to worry about on the ground in Norway in that case, or in Senegal, or in London. I'm going to worry about that because I've got a colleague dealing with those remote speakers. So sometimes it's just about deadlines, it's about communication, and it's about keeping it simple. I mean, we literally have a chart, a diagram that we show, and it's got the different stages. And we say, right now we're here. This is what we need. This is the deadline. And then, by the end of it, for example, what happens after an event? Well, you get your video files. We will publish them on demand if we need to do that in the event platform. But it's a process that you have to explain to people. Otherwise, what will happen is you'll get to the day of the event and they'll be like, oh, I've had another idea, Ralph.
Yes. just before clicking go live.
Yeah, not great.
Yeah, that's something that may happen. And let me share something with you. I don't think I should. But I was producing, and it was a big event, and just, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes before we have this last briefing before starting, and I was kind of thinking, I barely have idea what I'm doing here, what I need to do. Things went, and I think this is something that we should have in mind as well, is that sometimes we stress too much, and usually with the experience, with the know-how we got from other events, it's easier. How do you manage, because sometimes the organizers, they are stressing sources as well. How do you manage this, because sometimes they are like crazy the right the minute before. How do you manage that?
So we split the jobs up, first of all. So we have a really, really good client success team. And I should give a shout out to some of them. They're mostly ladies, actually, women, but Cecilia, Anne, Katie, also Ala, and Freddie. They've been fantastic for us. What a great team. And they do a lot of the legwork before we get to the event. So they're doing the video calls with clients. They're explaining the process. They're checking the call sheet because they know what we need. And then we have a different team. So people like on our team, we've got Liam and Paul, who are our event leads, and they're in different parts of the world as well. We have people in the US, in Canada, in Germany, Spain, Ireland, India. I'm sure I've missed one. UK, of course. So for that team, which is the technical team, or the vision mixing team, we call it, we're really focused on the delivery of the event. So we're, interested in Is, for example, this tool you're using, StreamYard, is it set up correctly? Do we have all the assets? Do we understand the flow? There's going to be a video, then there's going to be a screen share, then there's going to be some slides. What happens in between? And we also do a run through, not of every session, but we will talk through the call sheet. And if it's not clear, because it becomes a little bit like the Matrix, you start to look at this call sheet and you think, okay, you're going to go from one session to the next without any little bit of video or little bit of music. And you did it at the start of yours. You had a little bit of video, and then you brought me on screen kind of immediately. Things like that, you understand how the tool works, so you can make the flow look a bit better. What you don't want is nasty surprises, and so we will lock the call sheet a few days before, and we say, look, we've had a run through. You've had maybe a month of us talking to you. We've looked at the call sheet. It is what it is. And then if you want to make any changes to the flow, you're going to have to comment. It's all cloud-based, so we use Google, but you're going to have to comment, and we have to unlock it and kind of approve it. So it is what it is. I think some people, I don't know why, love the excitement of changing things at the last minute. For any production, whether it's theatre, proper filmmaking, which I've also had experience of, you're following a schedule, and the thing that is against you is time. So if you've got a session at 12 o'clock in the middle of the day, it's going to happen at 12 o'clock, and that's especially true when you're on site. And talking to me about completely changing it isn't going to stop the fact that the clock is ticking and we're getting nearer to 12 o'clock. And if I don't understand what you're doing, of course it's not going to go very well. So what we learned is to say, make those decisions earlier in the process. And then for me, I mean, again, particularly if I'm on site, I've got cameras, I've got sound, I've got lighting, I've got a lot of other things to worry about. You have to split the responsibilities within the team. But yeah, I mean, I've had similar experiences to you, particularly early on in COVID. And also to be honest, not very many, but sometimes quite aggressive people as well. And I have friends who are Portuguese, but I think British people, particularly English people, we don't tend to react. We tend to be quite, I think that's one of the criticisms, that we don't show our emotions enough. But under pressure like that, you are going to make mistakes. So you got to remember, especially during COVID, but just generally, we're all under pressure, and live streaming can be quite stressful if you're new to
Absolutely.
it, or if the clock, you're against the clock. Where is Marco, or where is Ralph? Like, we need this speaker, and he's not here. Well, the show's got to go on. We carry on. So yeah, we've seen a little bit of that.
Okay, you mentioned one of the most important parts when we talk about events, the speakers. And it's another complex universe. And I'm sure, because I face this as a producer as well, there are so many moving parts as well, and so many situations that can happen. Let's think a little bit before. What kind of, how can I say, contents, checklists, or other kind of materials you have to prevent everything, to avoid those awkward and unwanted situations? Because, and we can talk about them later, because there are so many situations, I think. And well, let me share the the joke, because one event you were producing, and I was the MC, and you sent to everybody. And I love this redundancy when we talk about this kind of events, because as we mentioned when we were offline, even though for us this is kind of our garden, our beach, like we like to say here in Portugal, for so many people this is not their beach, this is not their garden. Okay, they come here by for a few minutes or a few hours, and then they leave, and they won't be thinking about this anymore. So I sent you the email with the link, and I asked you if you have any questions about how to join. Please let me know, because I remember to that event you created a whole video explaining how to join to StreamYard. So,
Yeah.
what kind of materials do you have? And if you want to kind of make a list of the most typical situations that you want to prevent, that you faced, for instance, in the first event you managed.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. We have a series of things that we send. So in every calendar invite for a session that you speak at, it says, I think, 3 things about how to look good on camera, all of which I hope I'm following here. So I'm using a fixed connection to the internet. I'm not using Wi-Fi. I'm using a good microphone, and I've got my headphones in. I have to admit, I've normally got a better set of headphones than these, but for some reason they're not working today. But I have a little earbud that you wouldn't even be able to see. And yeah, you've closed everything else down on your computer. I have good lighting. So, and I happen to be using a green screen and I've got my fancy studio behind me. But for a lot of people, they're not doing that. So there is a video where we explain how to look good on camera. There is also a process that if people are worried or they're a really important sponsor, we can do a separate tech check with them. We can do it either one-to-one or we can do it in a group. And as I mentioned earlier, it's really easy to book in to do that. So we're trying to make it easy for the event producer, but we're also helping ourselves really. By the time we get to the live show, we should have less problems. You will always get people, and I think it comes from a place of concern, of worry, but you will always get people who are a bit too overconfident. I mean, you have to remember, if you think about the number of sessions that I've produced along with you, I'm into over 1,000. So I've seen most things and I can solve a lot of problems, but I can't really solve it with 4 minutes before we go live. And
Yes.
so the earlier you can get into the studio, the better. And ideally, you've done a check before. I think as well, I mean, I'm a camera guy by background, so and a video editor, so I have a bit of experience of like what really matters. And to be honest, good audio and decent lighting are the main thing. So it's almost like 80%. What's the 80% that gets you looking pretty good? Those are the 2 things, and a good internet connection. So sometimes I've run shows where people have said, "Oh yeah, no, the internet's not good in this room," and you just think, "Well, what were you hoping for? That the internet would miraculously improve for your live stream?" Like, you obviously can't say that, but
Yeah.
sometimes it's to be honest, a little bit of ignorance, but also a lack of planning. To just think, well, if the internet wasn't very good for your Microsoft Teams call, what we're doing right here, where we're sending higher quality video and a lot more graphics, clearly isn't going to work very well. So maybe you need to sit closer to your router, as the Americans say, or router in the UK, or maybe you need to use a fixed connection. I think as well, you have to accept that it is. I don't find this stressful because I'm also Irish, and we can talk for we can talk until the cows come home, as we say. But I think for some people, I mean, I could be here in 3 hours' time still telling you stories. But I think for some people, it's very stressful, and it's only when you see that as a producer, because we can see all of the video feeds, even if people are not on screen. And just some amusing stories. I've seen people dancing in the background. I've seen one guy playing his guitar before he started to present his business presentation. You sort of understand that we were all forced into this world of presenting, when really, if you're honest, maybe 1 in 50 people can actually present well normally, but we all had to do it. So it is a stressful situation. And my job is just to help get the best out of those people. I think if you explain it that way, if you say, look, I'm just here to try and make you look good, Marco, for example, you think, oh yeah, Ralph's okay. Whereas if I approach it by saying, your lighting's wrong and your microphone's wrong and where you're sitting and your camera, you're instantly kind of like, well, I'm already nervous and I'm not feeling great about this. So there's a little bit of psychology as well into being a good producer.
Absolutely. And I think this helped me in some events. In some others it's difficult because sometimes I just need to close one session and jump to the other one because I have someone else checking before I go into the go live button. So sometimes, but I faced this because I had one. I remember about a particular speaker who was pretty nervous before starting, and because, well, I made a couple of live shows before that.
Just a
I
few.
was, yeah, just a few. I made a conversation try to ease things, and I think at some point it worked, but it's always difficult because live streaming for some people is a stressful situation. And I think, and let me know what do you think about this, because it is a stressful situation, but sometimes people don't prepare as well as they should to prevent this stressful situation. What do you think about this? Because, okay, I'm scary, but I sometimes I avoid to think about it because this will be putting me in more stress. What do you think about this?
I think some people it's true. That's what's happening, or maybe they're just busy, to be honest. I think particularly when you're dealing with corporate conferences, there is an element that people have got a job to do, and then they've agreed to present for an hour, and suddenly that date has come around. I think as well, there are some people who enjoy the thrill, even if it doesn't go very well, of leaving it until the last minute. And that's true in any job, really. I mean, I used to work in the tech sector, high tech, and particularly in sales. And we would have some people who would arrive at the customer's office and then do their presentation, like put their presentation together in PowerPoint. And it
Portuguese,
used
probably. Portuguese
Portuguese.
people.
I don't know about Portuguese.
Probably.
One of the best camera guys I've ever worked with, Renato. He is from, I think, near you. He's just north of Lisbon, anyway. Maybe not quite so far over as you, because I know
Okay,
where you live.
having in mind
But
the size of the country and putting it in scale, like for instance, with United States, England, it's not that big as well in size. But the thing is, we are a small country, so
But I was
we
going
are
to say
we are near.
there. I think in every country there are good and bad, and I was going to say that I would say probably the best camera guy I've worked with is actually Portuguese. But there are some people that don't prepare, and I'm afraid it's going to reflect on you. If you, particularly as a presenter or as a host, you have to be able to adapt very quickly. You have to follow the flow of the conversation, but you should have some notes with some basic questions, and particularly for very high value sessions. And what I mean by that is either celebrities or famous people that perhaps somebody's paid to have on that live stream, or business leaders. And I've done all of those. You have to know what you should not talk about as well, because there might be certain things that you can't bring up. So I think, generally in life, if you don't prepare, it isn't going to go very well. But why people don't prepare, I don't know. I mean, in general, I'd say most of the speakers that we have are, and we, as I say, we cover mostly corporate events. They're experts at what they do, and it's pretty rare that you have a problem. And I think the more that the pandemic went on, and we were all using Zoom and Google Meet and Microsoft Teams, it kind of got better. But in the first 6 months, I was definitely dealing with a lot of people where I was like, particularly the internet one, or don't sit in front of the window because you become a silhouette. We can't see you, or have I mean, in my world, you probably see I'm looking straight at the camera. But the number of people who can't do that, or have their camera kind of over here somewhere, and you just think that's weird. But not
See my
everybody's
nose.
not everybody's a creative type. Some people are different, and that's what makes the world go round.
Absolutely, absolutely. And another thing about event video is that you provide the kind of, we like to call that in Portugal key in hand. Like you have the whole range of services when we talk about live streaming. How did you came up? Because I think, for instance, when you talk with me to host that Spanish speaked event, how did you came to this way of providing services? Because I think usually it's they get those people inside the organization, but you came and it's, I don't know, maybe it's a little bit risky as well. What do you have to say about it?
Well, I mean, I've always believed, somebody told me a long time ago that from a sales perspective, people buy from people and they buy from people that they like. And so, just like I'm on here now talking about how we do what we do, anybody that I speak to, whether they decide to use us or not, hi, Corinda, anybody that speaks to me, I will give them advice. And I've always been like that. I won't be somebody who says, well, I know the answer, but I'm not going to tell you because I'm not making any money out of it. That's not how I've ever operated. So I think when you see events that are not in the UK or the US, because my business partner, Mike, is based in America, it's because I'm pretty well known in my little world, but also I think a lot of people have referred us. They've said, Event.video are good, or Mike or Ralph, you should speak to them. And I give advice. And particularly as we move into hybrid, it's quite confusing. I think even the word hybrid event or the phrase hybrid event can mean different things to different people. And so they just want to talk to somebody who has done it, who understands. And it's all the little things that you say, for example, how long do I need to set up? Where are the cameras? Where is the comfort monitors, the screens that are in the room? Who's doing the audio? What should I do about social media content to show off the event? Should I have a highlights video? What would I need to do for that? So it's not just about the live stream or the guy on the stage. It's also about all the other bits of content as well. And in my case, I've been doing that for 10, 15 years. So I know what I'm doing. But I think at Event.video, we also have the team. One of the best things that came out of COVID, although it was a very difficult time for the event industry, most people who work as camera crew are freelance. So particularly in the UK and the US, so they're not necessarily part of a company. Typically, they're doing that to be more flexible. It's the lifestyle that they want. But also, of course, when there's a pandemic, that's a really big negative because there probably isn't much help for those people. And for me, what I was able to do was to bring all of my friends into Event.video. So every person who works at Event.video or who has worked at Event.video is a friend, basically, or a friend of a friend. So I can reference everybody. If I look at the team in India, Bassett, who's one of the key guys there, was somebody that I worked with in Kuala Lumpur a couple of years before. He was my production assistant. If you look at Ireland, for instance, Cecilia, we've worked together for years on other events. So it was an easy decision to bring those people in, but it was also something good that we were able to do. And of course, it makes business much easier if you know everybody and you know what you're dealing with and the strengths and weaknesses. I've completely forgotten the question you originally asked me, but anyway, I've got on to how good the Event.video team is, because without them, we wouldn't have been able to do as many events for sure.
Yeah, the question was about providing the kind of full range of services when we talk about live event, and for instance, that hosting MC
Mm.
job, usually it's made from someone from the organization, and this is something that you have on your menu as well.
Yeah, I mean, I have presented a lot of things. So in the past year, I think I've been the host of everything from a big textile exhibition, which will happen in Milan in 2023. I've hosted several big automotive conferences, particularly around electric vehicles. I've interviewed chefs and cooks. So, and I've made a lot of YouTube videos in the past as well. So for me, it was a natural thing that at times you want a professional host. I mean, if you've got a very technical, and I'm just thinking actually about another one, which was to do with essential oils and fragrances. So a big shout out to Tina for that conference. But some of those sessions were incredibly technically challenging. I might be hosting a session about battery technology. How do we get beyond the limits on electric vehicles at the moment, which are about, I don't know what this is in kilometers, but about 300 miles is typically what a car can go. So what, 400, 420 kilometers? How do we get beyond that? And I know enough and I know how to interview people that I can host that session. But I've also found myself hosting sessions about the European Union's chemical strategy, which I'm definitely not an expert on. But you wouldn't know that because I'm media trained and I know how to host that. You need sometimes that level of skill, and that's why we brought you in, Marco, for that Spanish stream of content. I mean, that was a big conference. It was based in Spain, but actually the two guys that run it, one is German and one is Dutch. So although it's based in Spain, you've got kind of a lingual, multi kind of nationality setup. My team, most of them were actually Spanish. So that's Paul, Matt, Anne, and then the local AV guys as well in the hotel. So it's only really me that was different. Of course, I've got a big advantage that English is a big business language internationally. But we have, I think, 12 hosts that we've worked with. So people who can speak Italian, who can speak French, Mandarin, Chinese. So it definitely, I think, makes a difference when you have a professional host and an MC. I'm not the only one. You're not the only one. But it is a skill, as you know. I mean, maybe I'll turn it around on you and say, why do people hire you over just doing it themselves?
Well, nice question. So
Put you on the spot.
That was not supposed to happen.
I'll just drink my tea.
Well, maybe one of the reasons is that I'm doing this since 2015. So I have, I don't know, maybe thousands of hours in front of the camera talking. So maybe this could be a nice thing from me, because yes, I think I deal good with cameras, and this is something important. Having this, I don't know how to say in English. In Portuguese, it's à vontade. It's a nice experience for me being in front of the camera, even though I have to admit I was pretty nervous because it was the first time doing that kind of job. So let me confess, but it was challenging as well. And one of the things about these, and I was thinking about it, is how much we learn, even though we are in the backstage most of the time, how much we learn about that given topic. Do you want to share some of your lessons learned by doing this?
Yeah, I mean, I think to a certain extent you're either a communicator or you're not. In the same way, you can either draw or typically you can do maths problems. They're not the same thing. But obviously, the more that you do it, you become better. I think, as somebody said to me, the ability to embrace silence, which made me laugh, but the ability to just shut up and let the other person talk. I mean, some of the best sessions that I've moderated have been when two speakers end up in quite a fierce debate. And I remember the first time it happened, and I was quite worried that, this wasn't going well because the guy over here was, not happy and the woman over here was not happy. But when I came off stage, everybody was like, that was incredible. I mean, without getting political, during the kind of pandemic time, I've hosted sessions where it's been about kind of the UK versus the European Union. So, related to the Brexit debacle. You can tell my politics, but I'm also Irish, so I'm a bit of both. But I think, and I remember that session, and it wasn't about who was right. It was just a fascinating clash of people who were very passionate about what they were talking about, which was CBD oil, so that you take for stress relief, and about the regulations. It was a fantastic session when I look back. I wasn't supposed to even moderate that session. The journalist who was doing it had internet problems. He'd moved house. He hadn't told anybody. And the internet wasn't working. So suddenly it's like, Ralph, can you moderate this? But my job was just to get them to, it was almost to encourage them to have that debate. I think preparation, you talked about that. I think also the sort of visual cues, so the nodding of your head, the smiling, the eye contact, which you should be doing in person, but you be surprised the number of people that don't. And I suppose it's easy to talk about reasons why you don't like a session or a host. One of them would be if I kept saying I mean, personally, that drives me insane. I just did it. But also, get rid. But I think also just not really being nice, or perhaps paying attention to the other person. So if they've just really given you a big answer and they've really tried to tell you something, and you just go right, on to the next point, that's not great. So there is something about human connection, and I think some of it you can learn and you can practice, and some of it you either have it or you don't, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And you remind me about something, because before, I don't know, maybe 3 years ago, maybe less, yes, I was planning all my interviews. Okay, like, okay, I will put this question, this and this, and at some point I gave up on that, and I made my questions uh, having in mind the flow of the conversation. Of course, we have some in mind before starting, because there are some questions that and I sometimes, when I bring someone to my live shows, like you for instance, I already have in mind some questions because they seem to me obvious. But also during the live show, oh, nice, you just came with a nice idea about a question, and I think this is important as well for the viewers, and also for the guest or the other speaker, because, oh, he's listening to me. And also to the flow of the conversation, because if we stay too strict to the script, it's kind of, we have breaks in the conversation, and it doesn't flow properly, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, that's the art of conversation, isn't it? And it's also in live streaming, one of the reasons why personally I'm not a fan of pre-recording content, because you can't engage with the people in the chat box or on Facebook or YouTube or wherever who are commenting on what you're saying. But it's more challenging. If you're live, we're live right now. I have no idea what your next question is going to be. But that's part of hopefully why it's a bit more engaging. And I think, yeah, this all comes with professionals. There are professionals in every walk of life. Certainly with cameras, there are people who have the most expensive cameras, but actually the quality of the content they produce is not very good. And then there are people who have very simple cameras but can produce amazing things. And it's just about practice, but also there is an element of creativity. In this case, it's about communication, that kind of creativity. If you aren't listening, if you aren't having some kind of connection with the people at the other end of the internet or in the studio, then it's going to come across in the final content. And time again, I see people try and moderate or host an event, in person particularly, and it's just left to somebody relatively junior. Oh, you'll go up and introduce the session, and it's boring for that reason. You I think you owe it to your audience to be a bit more engaging.
Indeed, yes. And I think it makes a difference when you have that feeling that you need to make a good job, and to and this is something that I like to say. I sometimes I give some advices. I never pretend to be a kind of public speaking expert, but one of the things that I have, I think, and I deeply and truly believe in this, and because people sometimes they think, and I don't know if you know it, but it's the number one fear on the humankind. It's public speaking. The worst fear that they it's more scary than dying. And the thing is, and I like to say this to people, look, when you go to the stage, those people in front of you, they want to see you shine. They
Yeah.
want to get inspiration from you. They want to get something interesting. They want to listen. So do it. They don't, because sometimes people think that the people in front of you, they want to see you fail. Not at all. Okay, some they may think about it, but I don't think it's the main thing, because we paid, we spent time, we gave up on something else we could be doing, and we want to get some meat, if you know what I mean. You we and so there's no point on thinking, okay, let me do this fastly, and there you go.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, I think your point about we just want everybody to be successful. I mean, I don't come in every day looking for all the things that are wrong, and I don't think many people do. I come in wanting to, think, okay, well, I'm talking to Marco this afternoon. I wonder how that conversation is going to go. Marco's a great guy. We work together on this project. Hopefully, we're going to talk about some interesting things. So yeah, I mean, public speaking being a fear. If you're really, really scared of public speaking, don't do it. Is my advice. Like nobody's forcing
Also,
you.
yes.
Um, but if you need to do it to maybe to get your profile a little bit higher, in terms of getting a promotion, or maybe your boss has told you you've got to do it, or you just think you should be doing it, and you're a bit worried, well, why not practice? Why not set up a Zoom call with a few people and say, right, I'm going to talk about this. What do you think? There is the content of what you're saying, and then there's the way you deliver it as well. And the best advice I can give anybody about the way you deliver it is to keep eye contact. It's ironically much easier in this virtual world, I think, because I'm looking at the Logitech little logo and the white light on this webcam. But if you're in a room, try and look at the back of the room. I mean, that's a theatre trick. If you ever speak to an actor, they look like they're looking at you, but they're not. They're looking at the back because the lights are so bright. I think try and just calm down, try and speak more slowly, and don't be frightened of silence.
Absolutely. And this is something that I like to say to people as well, because I made for some years, I made theater. I was, well, it was kind of not even amateur. It was like a hobby, a nice hobby, a summer hobby. And one of the things I like to say to people, it's the importance of the silence and breathing. And this is something, and maybe you can, I'm pretty sure that you can share some interesting golden nuggets on this, because one of the things we tend to do when we are stressed and we want to deliver our message fastly is that we start speaking fastly, and then we get out of oxygen, our tongue that starts rolling, and a mess.
Well, I think you've just said it. I mean, I think the biggest laugh I've ever had giving a presentation was because I actually forgot what I was supposed to say, and I delivered a line. I can't remember what it was, but I delivered a line, and then I just paused whilst I tried to think about what it was, and then I said the word, which changed it from a positive to a negative, and the whole room just fell. It was like I was a comedian, and I remembered it, and I thought, that's interesting that you don't have to have your sentence planned out in terms of what you're saying with your brain. You've just got to say it from the heart, first of all. You've got to say it from probably a position of positivity. I mean, everything I do, thankfully, I don't work for a newspaper, so I'm not trying to trip anybody up when I'm presenting. I'm just trying to encourage them to say something interesting, and also to remember that it's not about me. If I'm hosting, I'm just the little connection, and I'm trying to get people to say things. And generally, I've not had too many problems. I'm sure you've had it where people say to you, "Oh, there'll be loads of questions from the audience." It's normally a virtual conference, and you'd be like, "Oh, okay, all right," because I'm not entirely sure about the European Union chemical strategy, but there'll be loads of questions from the audience. Okay, and you get to the end of the presentation that the person's giving, or the talk, and there's no questions, and you're like, oh, okay, I've got 3 questions, and then I don't know what happens. But if you listen to them,
Yeah,
you can
absolutely.
often, and I mean listen to the whole presentation, even if you're not particularly interested in the European Union chemical strategy, there'll be something that you can pick up on, and you can turn it a little bit. So the best interviewers are not experts in any of these things, but they are experts in how to get that communication from other people and to bring it out on camera.
Yeah, because when we talk about communication, we talk more about listening than speaking.
Yeah, I had to listen really hard for the European Union. I don't think I even did chemistry at school. I mean, I did it for a bit, but I didn't do the high school exams. So for me, it was but I was more interested. I'm picking on that session, but I was more interested in the impact. Um, what were the real problems? What were some of the things that people think about chemicals? I'm talking about chemicals used in fabrics, or that are being driven around in trucks and lorries around the country, like anything. What are some of the things that we think that are actually not true? And one of the big ones, seeing as I moderated that session, one of the big things that I learned is that when somebody says a chemical is natural, so it's from the natural world, it doesn't necessarily mean it's your friend. And
Yeah.
I'm not saying I did think that, but I'd never really thought about it. And so this lady was saying, just because it's natural or organic doesn't mean it's good. There are some really nasty things out there that might irritate your skin, or hurt your eyes, or whatever, that you need to know about. And I was kind of like, oh, that's fascinating. Have you got any more stories? Like, what other things should we know? So I didn't have to be an expert on chemistry or their policy, but I did know enough to just be able to ask what were the big challenges, what were the successes you've had. I mean, we call it in communication speak, this is called NLP, or neuro linguistic programming. How do you feel? What does it smell like? Can you picture a time when you were really successful? These are all common techniques in NLP, but they're actually really good techniques to use as an interviewer as well, because instantly your audience is like, yeah, I want to know that. So it's just having some of those tricks up your sleeve, really.
Great. So, Ralph, we are coming to the end. And before the end, I need to ask you uh, 3 things we should consider, because the fourth is hire Event.video. I think it's the easiest way to get a successful event. But which 3 things you think they are really important to make a successful hybrid or virtual event?
Think about your audience, number one. So think about the output, basically. That's what I would say about making videos as well. What is the result? What does that look like? Really happy sponsors, 3 hours of content. I want people to engage for 30 minutes at a time. All of those things are really, really important in the planning process. So think about the end. Back to NLP. If you've had a really successful event, why was it successful? What does that look like? So that's number one. Number two, talk to your AV, audiovisual partner early, whether it's us or somebody else. The sooner you can talk to me and I can just tell you, and as I said, I do this all the time. People call me. Sometimes I'm in the car and it's like, we're thinking about doing this. And okay, well, yeah, you could do that, or you could save yourself some money by doing this. Uh, we're very fortunate that we're busy. I've been around for quite a while, but also I think it's just in my nature, and I think it's in yours, Marco, that you're going to try and help that person, and that's what they remember. So ask for advice if you aren't sure. Ask what other people are doing. You're not. I mean, best will in the world, you're not the only event producer out there. There are a lot of others. What are they doing? What's working and what isn't working? And then I think the third one of your four, seeing as you've given number four away, the third one is to just plan early. So the only way that you can minimize risk, I think, is to do things earlier. You could be the most brilliant person in the room, but if you've only got 5 minutes to go before it's go live, you can't fix a lot of issues, but you can fix them the week before or 2 weeks before, if you've thought about them. So yeah, those are my three things.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Before ending, how does people can find you?
Well, the website is actually our name. So literally event.video. If you type that into your web browser, no.com.co.uk, nothing like that, just event.video, you'll find us. You'll also find me on LinkedIn. And you did pronounce my name right. So Ralph Cochrane, it's Scots-Irish, which is actually better than most English people can do. So well done, Marco. Yeah, so you'll find me on LinkedIn as well, or you can email me. I'm just ralph@event.video.
Well, Ralph, thank you so much. It was a pleasure to have you here. Hope maybe sooner or later I will get you back. I will try to get you back to my live show because you have so many things and nice things and insightful things to share with us. Thank you so much. I will allow myself to kind of close the show in the same way we almost started with that promo video about Event.video, if you don't mind. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for all of you who are watching right now or later. Enjoy the rest of the week. I will be online on my live shows on Amazon later, so stay tuned. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of the day. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.